And this third panel is going to get into a lot of discussion about what technology and people and work and skills, how all those things change. We've got two, again, luminary leaders from two great companies, Salesforce and Asana. I want to introduce our moderator, who we've known for quite a while. She's truly a friend of Anderson. She's also an alum of the school, Paula Judge. Paula is the VP of Talent for Accel. Accel, as I mentioned briefly before, is one of the leading venture investors and growth capital investors in the Bay Area. Paula's got a lot of background on talent and talent identification. So she works with a variety of the portfolio companies at Accel, helping them think about how you recruit and develop and retain talent. And her talent background goes way beyond Accel. She used to work for Heidrick & Struggles, one of the leading executive search firms. And then to prove that career pivots can work and work very successfully, she started out with the San Francisco Ballet, and she worked also with the Robert Toigo Foundation. So notable pivot from earlier on in nonprofit management. She's got a history degree from UCLA. She's the chair of the UCLA Northern California Chancellor Society, and she's a member of the UCLA History Department Board of Visitors. So please join me in welcoming Paula Judge.
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back in person again. With increasing connectivity, an open talent economy, and the fast-paced growth of AI and robotics, all accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, these are driving dramatic changes in the workforce. The availability of new technology is fundamentally changing the nature of work. There are some cases in which humans work alongside machines, and others in which entire tasks and even roles are being automated entirely. In addition to this, new and unique challenges in hybrid and remote work that mean that almost every job, or rather job description, is now being reinvented. In the Future of Jobs Report 2020, the World Economic Forum predicted that robotics and automation would displace 85 million jobs by 2025. Yet it is also predicted that new technologies would create 97 million new jobs, but generally ones requiring more skills and more education. At that time, they also reported that today, approximately 30% of all tasks were done by machines, with humans accounting for about 70%. However, also by 2025, it's believed that that balance will have dramatically shifted to almost 50-50 combination of humans and machines. However, there are two different views. One where jobs will change, but there won't be a net loss, and the second one where there will be a notable loss of jobs in specific sectors, such as truck drivers or call center employees or retail employees. In the short term, employees will need to be retrained to work alongside machines, and in the longer term, we must be able to assess the broader issue of fundamental job loss. The movement of workers into, within, and out of an organization due to changing skill requirements caused by advances in technologies must be anticipated to meet future needs. Employers will need to prepare their own people with new jobs and career paths through ongoing job analysis, advanced training, and reskilling of their existing workforce. According to IBM, more than 120 million workers globally will need retraining in the next 3 years due to AI's impact on jobs. The role of in-house educational systems and training programs are becoming increasingly significant to create pipelines of workers with needed skill sets based on future of work projections. Gone are the days when learning and development was a nice to have. The very nature of how, where, and when we work has changed so dramatically. Pandemic-driven changes in work models have created both challenges and opportunities, including how to best attract, retain, and engage employees while also offering the value and purpose that employees now expect from work. Workforce issues such as retention, productivity, hiring, diversity, equity, inclusion, these are among the highest priority concerns for senior leadership. In recent Gartner surveys, CEOs rate culture as their biggest concern when it comes to in-office and work-from-home policies. And HR leaders then say the most challenging aspect of hybrid strategy is adjusting their current culture to be supportive of the workforce. Employee engagement, it's called. We've been talking broadly here about the workforce and employees, but we haven't really specified the fact that an employee base is made up of people from extremely different demographics, skill levels, life experiences, and now even work environment where and how you're getting your work done. Critical to this is an understanding of different employee personas. In fact, McKinsey, in a recent study, talked about a minimum of 5 different personas in the workforce. So you have to understand these personas and the life cycle of each of them, questions of how to train, enable, and engage new entrants to the workforce versus those who have family care responsibilities versus those who are at the later end of their employee life cycle. Hybrid and remote work creates opportunities here, but also significant complexity. All of these issues raise a fundamental question about the future of work. How will technology-based innovation and automation change this future of work? Which areas will experience the greatest opportunities and the greatest challenge? And what are the responsibilities of leaders managing the required transitions as well as negative externalities? I hope that you'll find with today's conference a much better appreciation of the role of technology in augmenting our workforce and assisting our workers, and how our speakers think about the problems, solutions, and leadership. I'm very happy to introduce our speakers for the day, 2 prominent and successful leaders in organizations that are leader innovators in the future of work. Tim Wan, the Chief Financial Officer for Asana, and Amy Regan Morehouse, Senior Vice President of Global Salesforce Ecosystem and Enablement and Trailhead Academy GTM. Tim is the CFO of Asana, an enterprise work management platform, fundamentally changing the way companies work. He is responsible for accounting, financial planning, and all business operations. Before joining Asana, Tim served as the CFO of Apogee, a leading SaaS provider of API platform technology and services for enterprise and developers. During his tenure, he successfully led the company through its IPO and eventual acquisition by Google. Prior to Apogee, Tim spent 13 years at Real Networks, including serving as the company's CFO. He earned his BA in economics from UCLA and an MBA from another university that's also in LA. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Amy Regan Morehouse is the Senior Vice President of Global Ecosystem Enablement and Trailhead Academy, and has spent more than a decade in leadership roles at Salesforce. As many of you know, Salesforce is the leading provider of automated CRM tools, integrating AI into many of their products. In 2021, they acquired Slack, the employee communication and collaboration tool, for over $27 billion. Amy leads Global Ecosystem Enablement and Trailhead Academy, where she focuses on empowering customers and partners with the skills, credentials, services, and solutions needed to drive adoption and success of their own Salesforce investment. She loves seeing people learn new skills, earn credentials, and grow their careers to see Salesforce customers thrive with a successful team of trailblazers. She's an equality advocate and also the executive director of FaithForce, one of the newest and fastest growing equality groups at Salesforce. FaithForce is an interfaith employee resource group at Salesforce focused on celebrating, supporting, and fostering an understanding of our global faith and spiritual diversity through inclusive and educational events and activities. For today's session, I will ask Tim and Amy a series of questions revolving around the role of technology and leadership in the future of work to better understand their insights. And of course, we'll use Slido for moderated Q&A. And that event code is TS3, T as in Tom, S as in Sam 3, and it's all lowercase. All right, so now we'll move on. So to begin, I wanted to frame this discussion, since we're talking about the future of work, I thought we would frame the discussion by talking about today. How are we working today in the age of post-pandemic, constant change, now layoffs and restructurings, economic uncertainty? How are we working today, and what is technology's role in that?
People say, like, where do you work? And I say, well, I work in my home office. It's great, connect with people all over the world. I work in the most beautiful office space in San Francisco, the top of the Salesforce Tower. If you haven't been there, come visit. But I also work sometimes out of my car in front of my kids' school before they need to be picked up, because that's what works for me. And I think what's interesting about today is we need to be able to connect with people We need to be able to share ideas and learn from each other, but none of us are really together all the time. So I think it's more important than ever that we have the technology to help us connect, work effectively, allow us to have the space to build conversations and relationships, even in a tech, infused workday. So I don't know, that's kind of how I'm working. And today I'm working from here. I was slacking outside the door right before here doing some approvals. So really we have to rethink how we work now. And I think many of us were doing that before, but I think the pandemic just completely accelerated it for everyone.
Yeah, similar to Amy, we have a hybrid kind of work environment. We're both working in the office, we're working from home. I was working here as well. I got in at about 8 a.m. But the beauty of being able to work at home or in the office is we actually daily, not only do we, have robust conversation, in-person conversation when we're in the office, but we have all these amazing technology tools and platforms that we're using to actually share experiences and actually share our work. And I think that's probably what we'll get into a little bit, but being we're a Slack customer.
Thank you.
So hopefully some of you
Also,
are
thank you.
Yes, hopefully some of you are Slack users. So,
What are some of the other technologies that you're using to enable this? It sounds like you're both working hybrid then, right? So what are some of the technologies that enable you to do this? Slack?
We obviously use Salesforce, being that we're Salesforce. So that certainly gives us an edge of how to make sure that we're connecting with our customers appropriately. Internally, we like to have fun. I think one thing that is really important in work is that you find the joy in it. Joy is one of my personal values, and I want to make sure I can have those opportunities. So I love a quick Slack huddle to share a joke that I heard or connect with somebody, see their face for a moment, even if I don't normally work with them. Obviously, we can work mobily from anywhere. So my phone, I don't need to be in front of a desk at all times, so I think that helps. So we also do fun things, There's a donut app and it just randomly pairs you up with people and you have a conversation. That's been great. It's the water cooler, but kind of helped by AI pairing you together. So we have to incorporate those human touch points that we need to have, even with all this great technology helping us.
I was waiting for Amy to say Asana, but.
Oh, we use Asana for project management. It's amazing.
But are there any Asana users here or have used it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, we live in Slack. We live in Salesforce. We live in.
I did not ask him to say that. We didn't know.
We live in Zoom.
Yeah.
Zoom.
We live in Asana. We live in Google Docs, where Google Slides.
Yep.
It's there's a and then even in the finance department there's a whole set of SaaS applications that we're using to run the business. In the marketing team there's a whole host of SaaS applications that they're also using to run their business. So every department or every function is have just like a myriad of SaaS tools that they're using to run their functions.
So Amy, you hit on a couple of interesting comments, and I wanted to transition a little bit into leading in this environment, because you talked about a quick huddle, you talked about community, you talked about connecting people, you talked about joy. We've now, what I'm hearing is that we have the tools that enable us to work anywhere, every day, all day, every day, which many of us do, which that's a separate topic of conversation. But how are leaders and how can leaders be most effective in this environment? Because even though in some ways we've always been hybrid, if you've had more than one office in your company, you've been hybrid because you had people in 2 different locations. But now hybrid takes on a whole new meaning and a whole new level of complexity. How are we leading today, and how can leaders be best in this environment?
I do think that we've learned new leadership muscles, I've always, I guess for the last 15 years, I've been a global leader, so working across time zones, Long ago, it would just be over the phone, and you had to schedule time to talk to people. Now scheduling is just kind of happens ad hoc a lot of the time in the work we do. But I think that the instant showing yourself on video is not for everyone. And so as a leader, you really need to carefully spend time talking to each of your team members and finding out what's their operating manual, what makes them tick, how do they like to work, and making sure that you're being as inclusive as possible in how you choose to communicate with people. You know, you don't over-rotate to doing these in-person events in your hubs, because one of my team members has been at the company 20 years and has been working remotely the whole time. And she's extremely successful. So I don't want to mess that up by saying, oh, you should fly and come and do these things, and sometimes that's not even possible. So as a leader, you really have to know what makes each person tick. It's that wonderful, you know, curiosity about, you know, what inspires people and what motivates them, how do they like to work habits, and then figuring out the right mix and making sure you can serve as many of your team members as possible.
Yeah, I think to Amy's point, this new muscle, because prior to the pandemic, you know, employee engagement is like certainly something that we care deeply about. But I think like employee engagement in a remote work where you don't see each other every day, that becomes harder. And then how you connect people's work to the mission of the company, that becomes even more hard. So I think like for many of us, like we had to kind of like double down on that muscle a lot more than we've had in the past. And for, you know, maybe not now in tech, but certainly if you look back at like the last 2 years, most tech companies either double or triple their workforce. So you had like a cohort of employees that had been with the company 1 or 2 years in person. And then you had another cohort of employees that had never even met each other until more recently. And like just how do you even integrate those experiences and ensure that there aren't two different class of employees, like, oh, the newbies and the old guard and, you know, people that had established relationships prior. Like how do you make sure to break down those walls and make sure you're still operating as one team? All those things really like were things that we didn't have to think about, but like we had to learn like how to do.
Yeah, we hired something like 15,000 people in the last 2 years. Most of those never met a person in real life or ever went to an office. So how do we get them on that mission of Salesforce and like where we're going and how we want to serve our communities and our customers? And we have a method called the V2 MOM. It's our visions, our values, our obstacles, our measures, and our metrics. And we start at the company level, and every single person interprets that for them. And I think that's just one of those like cultural connectors to every employee, even though they never met a person in real life. But it's, again, we have to reinforce it. We have to probably over-rotate on the engagement in these sort of different types of times.
Yeah, so I'm hearing some fundamentals around communication, leadership, checking in on your employees, but also using new and different technologies, Donut, for example. So being willing to use those technologies, but then also leaning in even heavier to make sure your employees are in fact using them. And that is trickling down. Like it feels like an additional set of follow-up and steps that need to happen from leaders especially.
Right, so they see us doing it, so they want to do it as well.
That's a nice transition then maybe into AI and robotics and talking about how AI will either is impacting it already today, because that World Economic Forum said that the mix will be 50-50 in just over 2 years. It's not that far away. How it's going to impact the future of the workplace. So what sectors and types of jobs do you think are already being impacted by AI and robotics, and how will that evolve in the future? Like what specifically stands out for each of you?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first. That's a hard question. Maybe because we already, like, maybe in industry-wise, I think like generally government, defense, and healthcare are very early adopters of AI because like the benefit of that is real time and there's just like a lot of applications. But Amy and I both come from enterprise software. So, you know, where I see it is like the marketing manager working with different algorithms. Like if you go back like 15 years, how they would acquire a customer was very rudimentary. Like they would try Google because that was new. They would like copy the data and like put it in Excel, and then try to like triangulate what the conversion rates would be. But like today, they can actually they can integrate all that data and start running algorithms and understand which channels are going to be most efficient. And based on the characteristics of those customers, they can like refine that algorithm really quickly. So I think AI and like many of these automation tools, like when you enter the workforce, you're just like, it's just gonna be part of the job. It's not like you're gonna have to rewrite something. People are just gonna expect you to do it. If you're, especially in marketing, there's just so many automation tools.
I like to think of AI as something that makes me smarter, like extra intelligence, not artificial intelligence. It's like extra intelligence to make Amy successful today. So if you're a salesperson, it's like, hey, these are the accounts you really should target because they're more likely to buy. That's just helpful to me. That's like a little magical person on my shoulder here, like giving me a hot tip on what to do. So I think if we, as knowledge workers, if we look at these types of innovations and technologies as not like something that will take away, although there will certainly be people that jobs, running these old-fashioned spreadsheets every day, they're hopefully going to have some freedom in their lives. But the rest of us will really be able to take advantage of this type of extra intelligence. When it comes to robotics, certainly there's a lot of things that humans may or may not like doing. And I think there's also some help there that can be automated from robotics help to make people more successful. But again, I just like to think of it more in the realms of extra intelligence to everything we do.
Yep.
Yeah, we did a study like the last few years where knowledge workers were saying that they spent 60% of their time doing work about work. And that's like, and maybe some of you like felt that, and that's why you decided to come back to business school. I certainly felt that before I went to that other school. And this is like a continuing problem of like, how do you coordinate work? How do you find the information? How do you work with each other?
Yeah.
And those things could actually get automated over time so that you actually can spend your time on the work that really matters and what you were hired to do. But we all have gone through this kind of like work about work and like, why am I in this meeting? Why am I chasing this thing down? So
I'm hearing a little bit that tomorrow's workforce some of the mundane tasks will be more automated and we'll be free to hopefully use our beautiful educated brains a little bit more. Do you think that there are skills that are going to go away or maybe other skills that people are going to need to develop or hone in order to be successful?
Well, basically guaranteed.
Yeah.
You will need more different skills that we haven't even identified yet. I mean, I have an art history degree, very helpful to my day job. And so I've been completely unqualified for almost every job I've ever had. So you have to constantly be learning new skills. You have to be curious about what's happening. And as soon as you see that, start trying to ask questions about it, learn more. Neil had great reference of like bringing people to the table that have that knowledge. You're gonna have to seek that out in every part of your professional life moving forward. So my kids are gonna go to college someday, and if they go into technology, I already know that whatever they learn their first year will likely be obsolete by the time they graduate, because something will have changed in that space. So how do we constantly look at opportunities to learn new skills? So I don't have the answer for exactly what new skill, except for I will just do a shameless plug. In 2026, there will be 9.3 million new jobs created that require Salesforce skills. So if you know anybody that wants to learn Salesforce, there's going to be some jobs waiting for them. So certainly I'm rotating on the Salesforce skills should be learned.
Great.
It's a great question. I actually, I was kind of looking back at when I went to business school and thinking about, when you're a student, you're sometimes like, oh, I really need this corporate finance class. It's going to be so important for that interview because I want to be able to talk about net present value, discounted cash flow. But if I fast forward 20 years, the class I wish I actually cared more deeply about are actually the organizational behavior, and it's all the people classes, because as you're gaining more knowledge and moving, building a team, you're not managing the work. You're actually Amy runs a big team. Like, you're actually managing people. And I wish I had like just paid a lot more attention, or I wouldn't have so many pitfalls earlier and lessons I had to learn earlier in my career. But like, if there's one class or one area that like you should pair with technology, is like organizational behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I do love liberal arts degrees, so I didn't want to, put anyone to shame if they're also an art history degree. You learn about curiosity, learning about different cultures, things throughout history and trends and things that have happened. So there's a lot to be said for a lot of different backgrounds are going to be relevant to your job moving forward, but you just have to be ready to keep learning new things.
Well, as a history major, I'll shout out to the art history major. And as a history major sitting inside of top-tier venture capital, investing in technologies that I don't even understand, I mean, that tells you a little bit about, one, the relationship between your undergraduate degree and your career, but how you need different sets of skills to be successful in a lot of environments. And a lot of the skills you need to be successful in a technology environment don't have to do with tech.
Correct.
Right? They don't have to do with the tech. Now, as an engineer, clearly, you need to understand the tech and be able to code, but in a lot of other roles, you don't. What I find interesting, because as we talked about AI, I just read an article yesterday about how AI is impacting recruiting and human resources functions, because a lot of those functions in the past have been kind of tedious, busy work about work, chasing, following up, emailing, chasing, following up. Sales is the same, right? And AI has automated a lot of the tedious work, which means now our skills to communicate, to influence, to convince, to get somebody over the line, like these interpersonal skills become so much more important.
I will say, though, also in the age of innovation and AI, is we also have to make sure that the technology is used for good, and that we are having an equality lens of everything we do. A couple of years ago, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we started an Office of Humane and Ethical Use of our technology. And we wanted to make sure if you were using Salesforce, you weren't going to use it to harm people. You weren't going to use it and expose their private details. And sometimes we have to, as a technology provider, make really difficult decisions. We made a decision to sever our relationship with a customer that was selling guns at the retail level, because we just were like, nope, that's just not what we're going to be in. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions to make sure that AI is a force for good in this work. So yes, so that their people skills can shine.
So let's transition then into how do we get people there, right? We've been talking a lot about retraining or reskilling. So I wanted to talk a minute about how should companies approach this, especially with a workforce that's so diverse and so nuanced and so distributed, and has such different life experiences. Amy, I'd love to start with you. Maybe if you could explain the strategy behind offering Trailhead training to the public for free.
Yeah, so I mentioned I'm a lifelong learner. I'm dyslexic, so I'm never the smartest person in the room. It's kind of like my mindset coming in. It's not that I'm not the smartest, it's just I may not have the answer for you right now. So I always dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. So I'm a lifelong learner. And as our company has grown, I mentioned all these jobs that are waiting for people with Salesforce skills. It's a great problem to have, but we need to bring people along and teach them Salesforce skills. I think we also, as a company that lives by our values of trust and customer success, equality, sustainability, we really want to make sure that we are providing everyone with access to the career pathways of the Salesforce ecosystem. And that means that we want to also help diversify the ratios of tech, because the populations typically in tech are sort of lopsided. So as we're seeing this need for skills, as we were seeing the opportunity to provide people a pathway to careers in tech that maybe didn't see it, the team created Trailhead. Trailhead is an online learning platform. 20 million people are using it to get Salesforce skills. And there are all types of Salesforce skills, both tech and non-tech. So it's not all developers and coding. But it was modeled after the National Park Service, where the national parks were set aside in the United States so that the most beautiful places in the US were accessible to everyone. not just the elite that could afford to go to the fancy place. And so that was kind of the idea behind Trailhead. And if you go and look at our stuff, it looks all like the national parks. But the person at the center that we always focus on is the trailblazer. And the trailblazer, if you look up the definition, is someone who's a lifelong learner, who's an innovator, who likes to go forward and leave the path for others. So that's why we chose to make it free. It's gamified, it's on your phone, you can rise in the ranks and all these great things, but it was really important for us to also highlight the stories of these trailblazers. So if you go there, you can meet, online, get to see these histories of people that were a hairdresser and now director in IT, running Salesforce implementations. We have a place to start you on your journey. We have these mascots, these characters, and they're just like your buddy as you go through and learn. So it was really important for us to catch the widest net, to provide as much opportunity to as many people as possible, and certainly people who didn't see themselves in tech with this free platform. So both it helps us, but it also helps people find meaningful work. And we really want to be a force for change in the world. So it helped us live up to that value.
That's excellent. And force for good, and a smart business decision, because
all in one.
People who buy Salesforce need to have it implemented and administered, and I have personal lived experience of not having enough people to do that and having to find them and train them quickly. So I think that's amazing. Tim, what trends are you seeing? So we're talking about reskilling from the company's perspective, goals, objectives, all of that. But what about the employees? What are their attitudes towards lifelong learning, also constant reskilling. Hey, we're going to train you on this new app now, and now you're going to use this app, and then we're going to train you on this one, and you're also going to use that one. What are employees' attitudes towards that right now?
Yeah, I think the tech has always been there, but you might say like, hey, why hasn't tech been adopted sooner? Because sometimes you'll find like there's just like new technology, but they go nowhere. And generally, it's change management. It's like getting people to do something different requires a set of circumstances that makes them like say, oh, okay, I'm gonna adopt that. So I think the pandemic actually probably accelerated digital transformation. I heard we had talked about digital transformation earlier today here, but probably pull that in like a good 5 to 10 years, because I'm not sure like my aunts and uncles would have like used Zoom, quite honestly. 2 years ago. They're just not at the age where they were like adopting technology. But now they're like, oh yeah, Zoom, subscription services on the internet to like enable communication, great. So what we're focused on, at least at Asana, is this kind of learning and development, enabling a lot of young managers how to be more successful in managing teams. It almost feels like we lost a couple of years of real life training because we've been remote for so long. Team members don't know each other. Team members have never worked together. They don't understand each other's idiosyncrasies. So like there's just like all these different things that we're trying to up-level managers. And I think like we, at least at Asana, that's kind of what we've been investing a lot of our time and energy on.
And we have to segment it too, because there's people that are early in their career, like they work at Salesforce for their first job. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky, Or people that are this is probably the place where they're going to retire. Yeah. So if you just are going to, let's all get on Slack. I think there are likely a lot of employees that were like, what? What do you mean? So I think you have to make sure that you have the right kind of career pathways and adoption, change management, like you were talking about, for all the different types of employees as the diversity grows.
Well, so excellent comments, and I think it leads nicely back to collaboration and teamwork. We touched on it at the beginning, but I wanted to take just a slightly deeper dive now for a few minutes. Starting with you again, Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about how maybe Asana has changed the nature of successful teamwork?
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you, some of your customers in here. Essentially, Asana you can view it as a work management platform, but some of you may know it more as a project management platform. And if you think about work, everything is essentially kind of a project or task related. Okay. And what Asana does essentially have a living system of your work assigned, connected to projects or portfolios with the assignee and due dates. So nothing ever gets lost. and you can still collaborate. It helps you coordinate the work and do handoffs so things don't get lost. Has a system of record for who's doing what by when. And we have customers that are a team of 5 to our biggest deployment is over 100,000.
Wow.
Wow, that's a big team.
Yeah, and Salesforce has a very big team on it. Slack is also a customer, both your companies.
Excellent.
I think it's really kind of enabled, people to have their time back, quite honestly, and also if they're working on product launch, events, or marketing, it's really allowed them to kind of like automate many of those like routine tasks or things that they can quickly coordinate without having to jump on a call or do email.
I think what's fun too is you really as a leader have to be kind of getting to know your talent superpowers, as Neil was saying earlier, right? What is your superpower? Yesterday I was on a call with someone, only been at the company a year, probably 4 years into her professional career. And on this call, she came up with this whole separate way that we should be running something. And I was like, yep, there we go, let's go do it. And so I think also like how we assemble the teams, how we reassemble the teams based on different factors and what we're trying to achieve, it's complex sometimes for us to have to think it through, but really focusing on high performing teams and letting people really bring their best talents to the project really helps you go faster. So it takes a little work setting up, but it definitely helps you probably get to a better place at the end.
We have a company in our portfolio, and they were talking about their values the other day, and one of their values is work in the open, which to me, as somebody who is not at the beginning of my career, I thought, that's so fascinating because we used to work like this. We used to work in cubes. We used to work on laptops that were not connected to anything and maybe share with disks and print things out. And anyhow, it was a very different way of working, and their value is work in the open, or one of their core values. But it's Slack and Salesforce and Asana and all of these other tools that actually allow us, Google Docs, Google Drive, that allow us to work in the open. And it is interesting because I think then if you're working in the open, true collaboration can take place, right? It's hard to collaborate if you're keeping things from others, but if it's all out there. We're coming up on Q&A time, so I wanted to maybe close with one sort of thought-provoking question. Are AI and collaboration tools really sophisticated enough today to support company culture and career development? And if not, is there something that's missing, or do the tools themselves need to evolve?
Yeah, probably not. That's my general sense. Culture is defined by like not by one individual. It's generally, and culture isn't static, culture evolves. And it takes really a team or a whole company to kind of create that culture, create those values. I think like AI is helpful, but AI has biases, and those biases are generally are created because the person writing the AI may have their own personal bias written into that code. So you have to be really careful. But I don't think AI is remotely close to like helping craft culture or values or anything at this point.
Adding on to what you said, both of you said, there's an element of authenticity and transparency in that open kind of way of working that I think is sort of new for everyone. You also have to be open to criticism because it is feedback. It's just a point of feedback. And then how do you use that to make something better is really important. And often as we grow our careers, we think we kind of have to be an expert in something and say like, this is what I do, I'm such an expert in this. But things keep changing. So I would just say that I think there's this wonderful sense of authenticity, but we also have to give feedback to the technologies that we use. I mean, Slack, internally, we get a lot of new features that they're trying out to see what works, what doesn't work. And they really want that open feedback. So I think it's up to us to help course correct where these things may not be helpful or may be harmful. But I think it's also up to us to be open, because once our work is out in the open, we've got to be open to that feedback and trying to make it better.
I'm going to move over to the Slido questions now. And again, if you haven't posed your question yet, it's T as in Tom, S as in Sam, 3. TS3.
What page?
The Slido. So Tim, you touched on this, and it is the number one question, or the most upvoted question coming from our group, which is AI is not being built with enough diversity in mind, and the result is discrimination and bias against minorities, against many groups actually, often based on just who happens to be programming it, intentional or unintentional. How do you prevent this? Or how do you prevent this in your own work? You talked a little bit, Amy, about being aware and providing feedback, but let's drill into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's like constant monitoring. You know, I work with a lot of really like smart, no, they're not kids, but like smart folks on my team, and like they want to make you want to make decisions that's based on data, but many of your decisions like 80% data, 20% art. And that art is a combination of experience, your interaction with each other, and understanding the ramifications, the diversity, the ethical, all these other goals you're trying to achieve. And you know, AI can be a force of good, but we're going to have to monitor and be really vigilant about how we deploy it and how it's written and who's writing it. There's no perfect answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear, I'm not an AI expert, but I know people that we can refer you to for really fully accurate answers. But it all is in the design. Having the diversity at the design table is critical. Getting the feedback on, even if you had diversity in design, there was unintended consequences, and taking that in as soon as possible. You kind of need a group of people that are open and willing to poke holes throughout. It also extends to policies, so not just AI itself, but like the policies that we have in usage or in, you know, where we will see it. We have to think about accessibility and AI. I mean, there's so many diversity elements that have to go into that design, but also be open that we're going to have to constantly keep making it better.
The next question that pops up, actually, so maybe we'll talk about one more specific element. Innovative digital solutions, especially project management, collaboration tools, are not accessible to users who are visually impaired. Are either of your companies addressing this, and how have you seen this addressed in other tools?
Yeah, we have accessibility now. It took us a while to build it, but we do have it.
Great.
But I think what we're seeing now, is that many enterprises that we're selling into, that's a requirement. Especially in Fortune 500 companies. It's like, if you don't have it, they're not even gonna talk to you. So I think this is just gonna be pretty much table stakes if you want to build software and sell software.
Yeah, and even when we've acquired companies, maybe didn't have that as part of their design, we have to quickly develop an action plan, because we want it to be available to as many people as possible. And sometimes it's making sure the layout is different. We completely revamped our entire user interface, which is a lot for a product that was 20 years old, so that it would be more accessible. We do not use certain colors, different controls on the page. Is it perfect? I'm not the judge of that, but it is an intention to constantly be as inclusive as possible.
And I think that's great, and I agree with you. A lot of decisions are made, products are sold, they get baked in, and changing them is hard. But a little plug for entrepreneurship, I mean, you can build those products. You can make new products that address broader groups, that address specific groups. We see a lot in our portfolio of founders who are very culturally driven, they're very accessibility driven, and their goal is to build products differently for different groups of people to use. So there's huge opportunity, I think, in that as well.
One of my training partners is actually the Blind Institute of Technology. And the CEO, Mike, is blind, and he teaches people how to develop, like developers, checking their code on Salesforce, and these developers are blind. So it's just, really making sure, again, that we have the right tools, that we have the right training for these people, not just the tools, to make sure we're including everyone. Returning
to employee engagement again for a minute. What have you seen as some success with social employee engagement to ensure that fully remote workers are still included with the hybrid and in-person workforce? So you talked about this person from Salesforce who'd been fully remote for 20 years, but what about new entrants and others who are fully remote and the workforce is hybrid? Like, what are some specific things and some things that you've seen as successful in helping those employees really engage and feel engaged and part of the dialogue?
Well, at Salesforce, we do a lot of remote hybrid, games and activities and streaming our events and things like that. I host office hours, so anyone from my organization can pop in. I do them different time zones across the month, and we just chat and get to know each other. And it sounds so simple, but what's great is that the people who show up are all different roles, all different sort of levels, different times in their career, different hobbies. Last week we were talking about Halloween costumes. It's not necessarily focused on work, although sometimes they choose to use it as an opportunity to give me like a really hard question. And I'm like, okay, this is open, so I guess I'll answer it. But mostly it's just to connect because we can't bring everyone together.
Yeah, our hybrid is somewhat different than just a full flex model. So we're what we call synchronized hybrid. So we're in the office together 3 days a week. And then 2 days we're essentially remote. So being in the office allows us, because we generally have a very young demographic, allows us to kind of like spend more one-on-one time with some of the new leaders or new hires. So for the most part, many of them this is like their first job. Yeah. So it allows us to kind of like have more interaction and more mentoring in person. I'm just not very good at, quite honestly, like on Zoom, if you show me a spreadsheet, I'm using my reading glasses and trying to like look through your formula. I'm pretty good. Like if we do it together, hunch it over your shoulder, let me look at your formula, and then give you real-time feedback. I'm better that way. Yeah. And like that's kind of my style, and like some people know it and they're like, okay. So I think like you gotta understand kind of what Amy says, like what really works for that other person and where they are in their career.
Okay. Excellent. Looks like we're at time. There's certainly some more questions, so hopefully we'll see some of you afterwards or at lunch. Yeah. And I wanted to say thank you so much to Amy Regan Morehouse and Tim Wan. Excellent panel.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you so much.